Hello, my friends. Yesterday, I finished this bag, and I am a little obsessed with it because it has so many textures. I love it. These are some crocheted little doilies that were on there, and then there's little bits of vintage linen. I got off some tea towels. I wove some roses and did some other embroideries. I cut out these little butterflies and stitched them on, which gave so much dimension. The thread painting's one of my favorite things, although I'm particularly obsessed with my little bees. They even have wings. But I was out last night with my purse in tow, and I realized it wasn't finished. There was a little bit. This one piece was not yet completely thread painted. So I thought I would sit down with you friends and finish up my bag and chat for a moment. I have like an hour until I have my next appointment, and I've been doing stuff all day. And so it is time to take a little stitching break and breathe for a moment. I think I've asked you this before, but do you only stitch like at night or in the morning and, just have a block of time? Or are you like me where you always have a project with you and it's a little reward for yourself throughout the day? Sometimes people ask me, how do you do so many projects? And I mean, really, I was thinking about that. I'd say that's probably the secret to it, is that I will take any time I can get to stitch. It does not have to be a giant block of time. Of course, it is my preferred pastime if I have a free evening. I am not, I don't know, like if I'm going to watch a movie, I better have something else to do while I'm watching the movie. Anybody else relate? I just would prefer to have something that my hands can be doing. And, when it comes to making a million French knots, this is not like a highly intellectually taxing exercise. I can definitely be doing some French knots while I'm doing something else. Okay. Now, because I finished this already and already added my little adorable rope handle that used to be part, I think, of a curtain and is now my handle, I do need to make sure that I don't stitch this thing together. And what I have discovered in the past is that my iPad actually makes a pretty good little surface because it's very strong, but it's not totally hard. It has a little give to this cover, which is a little awkward and weird here now, but I think this will be a good way to have something in there. Of course, you could put a book or something else if you ever do something like this, like I have done. Or if you're just stitching on maybe a bag that is, you bought at a thrift store and you wanted to add some embellishment, then you might have to, do that. Okay, that is too little thread for too much more sewing. So I'm just going to run that little guy back in, remove my handy thing, and just going to turn that inside out to make my final. I'm just going to stitch it through and then tuck a knot in. I don't know. That's how I always finish things. Or not always, but most of the time, I like to put a little knot, but a tiny, tiny little knot. It's not adding a lot of bulk. And I just run the back of the needle through if I have enough thread. And then I'll cut it off. Okay, full disclosure, the backstory, as it were, of my project here is not lined, it's not covered. I could flip this baby out inside out, and you can see where I have tiny little stitches where I was just stitching on stuff. And then my thread painting has quite an interesting backstory, I must say. But I'm not going to cover that. If this were a high use bag, or if I end up giving this to someone else or selling it, then what I might do is make a little bag that I'll stitch inside of this one. So just a little bag with a finished edge, and then stitch the inside, let it float inside. I might do that. if I were finishing it for, say, oh, sorry, I just smacked you with my needle. Hopefully that did not hurt. But anyway, if I were selling it, I would probably add a little bag just so that nothing gets hooked onto the stitching. Although I personally enjoy seeing my stitching. So now these are interesting little painted flowers. There's a lot of turquoise, or whatever you would call this color. It's not really teal. I think it's more turquoise. That is in the leaves, just a hint of it. And then some yellow green, some kind of a Kelly green. You can see it in these. And at first I thought, well, do I want to keep those original colors? You know, here's the thing. If you are working from a painted piece, or you're working from a pattern, or you're working from something else like that, you know, you can follow the colors you're given, or you can completely create a different palette. I'm a photographer, as I have mentioned before, and you know, one of the differences between painting and photography is that in painting, you can really choose any palette you want for your completed piece, because, you know, you're not at the mercy of what the camera captured. Now, obviously, with digital photography, neither am I. I have many times changed the colors of anything. If a family says, this one child didn't wear the right color, no problem, I can change that. But in general, you know, photography has been historically capturing what you see, whereas painting can be that if you're going for total realism or photorealism, but it also, there's a lot of changing it to meet whatever you want it to be. And the same is true with this thread painting. Now, in my thread painting for this project, I've really tried to be pretty close to the colors that I found in the original pieces because I really liked them. I am enjoying these little bits of turquoise run through these leaves. I like that. And I especially like how it looks from a distance of a little bit. But, you know, you could just go over the whole leaf with green. It could be whatever you want. Okay, I changed my mind on putting something in between. I'm just having my hand back here because I'm needing to switch out my color of thread and things like that more often. All right, turquoise, just a couple little strands and we're done. So have you had any phenomenal finds this week? I'm curious as to what you're working on. Do you prefer to work from a pattern or some kind of a guide? Do you love doing completely free-form work? I've come to really love just creating stuff as I go. But, you know, there's a lot to be said for like an embroidery kit or something like that, where it's just, you don't have to think about it and everything is right there. I'm thinking about putting together some slow stitch kits, because that's, to me, sort of an in-between. You're given a limited number of pieces and then you're creating something out of that. And sorry, I've got one little French knot that I think wants to live here in this teal, and then I will move on to a different color. But anyway, you know, I know some people have trouble finding vintage linens to incorporate into their pieces. And so, you know, living here in the American South, there's still a good amount around. You know, not tons, but a lot. Definitely a lot more than in some places. And so I'm wondering if it would be worthwhile to create slow stitch kits like I see some others doing. Because some of my friends have said, you know, I'd love to do that, but I have no idea what I would put together, which I can understand. I think there's different skills involved with this kind of a hobby. And so I thought, well, maybe I could put together some kits that incorporate, you know, pieces of fabric, maybe, you know, some bits and pieces from various vintage linens, and then just some scraps of fabric that you could use. Anyway, thinking about that. All right, now let's bring in some green. Do you have your threads organized by color? Like, I don't try to do them all in order. That would not last for more than a second. I think that might be the color. Yep. I just like to have them like this so that I can find what I need. And I am not the girl who notes the numbers, which, you know, if I were creating kits for someone, obviously, well, I mean, if I were creating a kit where everyone was doing the same thing, I would need to be very aware of the number. But I'm more, you know, I generally need a green. On this one, I need a generally yellow-green. So knowing exactly which one that is not as important for this, but there we are. Well, I'm glad that I noticed this because now I can come back and finish this as well. Yeah, I think I left all of that. Now, I thought maybe I had left this because I don't mind some of the color of the flower coming through, but I think I had intended to come back through and add some of this color stitching. So let's go ahead and do that. What stitch would you use for this? Now, if it were a regular leaf that I was just doing in a leaf shape, I might use a feather stitch or a fly stitch or a fly stitch that I kind of supplemented with other stitches. But for this, pretty much for all of my thread painting on these, I've been using long and short stitch for anything like that and keeping it a little rough looking. And I just don't mind that. And then obviously for this, it's 1,000 French knots. You just wrap it around your needle. I think part of it is because I'm not very careful. You know, maybe if I were more exact, maybe I would be more frustrated with my French knots. I pretty much wrap my needle 3 times and pull it through, and most of the time it comes out okay. Yeah, I'm liking this better with the whole thing covered. You know, again, I could leave some areas of this with the original painting, you know, visible. That would be fine. That would be a design choice. But because the whole thing about this particular bag is texture, I think I'd rather have it all the same kind of texture throughout on the leaves. It's just gonna look better, I think. Yeah, I like that. Okay. It's also going to make this look a little more even because I think that these turquoise little veins look amazing, but they kind of stand out in an odd way right now. And it's because it's not all stitched. But here in a moment, when it all is stitched, I bet it's going to blend better. The other thing is that if you have a little contrast, like you have here with these turquoise elements, you can also kind of go up on them and maybe tuck them under a little bit more if you wanted to do that. So like if I wanted this to show up but not quite as brightly, you know, I can cover the side of it a little bit more like that. And then I think it blends it in a little bit more. Now let's see. This already has the thread over it. I'm just going to run one little piece of the lighter yellow-green. And let's see. This part does not have stitching either. So I'm going to just come in here, the little yellow-green in these parts. And I wasn't loving in some of this, like on here, I didn't like how stripy it looked, and that makes a ton of sense that I had just not come in here with the other color. So it's hard when you're stitching over something painted because the color's already, you know, obviously there's something there, but when you feel over it, then you're like, oh wait, that's not stitched, that is painted. And I'm all over mixed media. I like that a lot. And so, as I said, in some cases, I might just leave it that way. But for this particular project, I think having all of this thread painted where it's changes of color but not of depth is going to end up looking better. Okay, now I'm going to go over to this side. Whew, that's tight in there. There we go. I'm running it through, like I'm running this part just underneath the surface, catching it, I think, on the placemat, but not all the way through, which I would recommend. But you could run it, if you're trying to make it more sturdy, you could run it all the way through, but it would make it hard. And I would recommend just stabbing it in that case. But what I'm trying to do here is actually just get that color in there. So I don't need to go all the way through all the layers. I am just running this over and under this layer that the flower was on, which, as I mentioned before, is a tea towel. When I originally bought this tea towel, it was expensive for me for something I would buy for a project. It was $20. I don't pay that even for like a nice piece of vintage linen. I just don't. But I'll tell you the reason, and I think I told you this before because I showed you the riches of this tea towel. It had, I think, 25 flowers like this. 1, 2, 3. And I just could see, this is where we get into craft math. 25 flowers divided by $20, that's less than $1 per flower, quite a bit less. Now it's still expensive. Paying $1 for a feature, I don't know. I mean, I try to keep it under that because there's so many features on any one bag, right? But for this, goodness, those little tea towel flowers have become such a feature on so many of my projects, and I just love them. In fact, I'm trying to look up the artist who designed it. Obviously, it's commercially made. I think it's called Green Box, but Katie Daisy was a little label on there, and so I'm trying to find if I can, find the source of the artwork, because if she sells other stuff, I would love that. You never know what you might find as a source. Okay, so now my leaf, this leaf, is much more even. And I feel like I've worked the blues and the turquoises more into the flower, which I'm happier with. I want it to have all those colors because it's interesting. But now they're more a part of the dimension is the same, and I think that's better. All right, little knot to finish it on the back. And now I'll get to the other leaf that I originally was the reason that I decided I would need to finish this thing. Let's see while I'm paused here whether there's anything else unfinished on here. And what is unfinished? Obviously, I could fill in lots of little spots, but good designs need a little white space, and there's different ways to create that, but I'm happy with this. And because the background even is so textured, I don't need every inch covered. I could have that. Some people would do that, and it would look beautiful, but I'm good with these different elements having a little bit of breathing room around them. Okay, last leaf. Sorry, I'm not trying to make you dizzy by spinning this thing around. Just trying to decide the best way to attack. All right, so, there we go. All right, so now we're gonna fill in this last bit of yellow, green, in the leaf. I may end up coming back with another color. We'll see. We'll see what it looks like. So I'm still thinking about my Roxy's Journal of Stitchery. I was watching Kate in the Nest earlier today, and she was putting her vase together, which made me very eager to get a move on with what I'm going to do. I think I mentioned I've already got my vase. I've already thought about what I'm using for that part of it. And so now I'm just needing to work on the background because I have not yet started actually assembling or putting together the parts even up to this point, because I'm still even working on how big I want it to be and what I want it to be. I've kind of come to the conclusion that for now, I might like to do it in pieces. That way I could work on different parts of the project and then assemble it later. Are any of you doing it that way? Those of you doing hashtag Roxy's Journal of Stitchery, volume, 7? Which is actually a still life and not really a journal, but same thing because it's showing your development and progress. Anyway, I think I mentioned before, I would like to maybe do a canvas, and I think I want it to be at least 16 by 20, maybe bigger. But beyond that, I don't know. I did start working on something. Let me see if I can show it to you easily. It's right here. No, is that it? Oh, here it is. I'm thinking about, no, is that it? Yeah, here. I'm thinking about just piecing together a lot of different shades of white and cream. And I started stitching it on this little piece of background fabric. And I started doing some running stitch along the bottom. And then I thought, no, what I really want to do is just do a little bit of running stitch just to get these on here. Not really, maybe the edges, but like not even in a particular way. What I'm thinking is this might be the wall or it might be the table. I don't know. See, that's the thing. If I do these just a bit at a time, then, you know, as I get a better idea of what I want it to look like, I could put it together. Anyway, I started working on this while I was on a meeting. I was on a Zoom call, and after I finished the other work I needed to do, I just started doing that because there could not be something more simple than an off-white little collection of fabrics that I am stitching together with off-white thread. Even the color palette, I don't know, it's just insanely soothing and simple. So I started that because I think obviously, well, not obviously, you could do it many different ways, but I'm thinking that my vase of flowers will probably be pretty colorful. So then I thought, well, maybe that could be really the feature and the background could be more muted so as not to have conflict. Anyway, thinking about that. Though I could go with that as the wall, and then I could do maybe like a quilt kind of thing for the tablecloth. That's another thing I've been thinking about. Because I think I told you, I got these little bits of quilt from a lady, and they're sitting over there looking at me, saying, Kate, what are you going to do with us? And I'm like, I don't know. Probably, because I think there were, I don't know, like maybe a dozen 9 patches in this quilt top that already had a big piece cut out of it. And my word, is it threadbare. I mean, it's definitely in need of some love. And so I washed it and I hung it out to dry outside, and now it's much happier. Still quite threadbare, but it's going to make for a few different kinds of projects, I think. But I did think about that. Like, what if it was a table with just a simple white wall, kind of in many different fabrics, and then a quilt for the tablecloth, and then this pretty vase of flowers, and then I could do a ton of thread painting. So, as you might be able to tell from my voice, all of that is quite appealing. And I'm thinking about that. Ooh, don't get stuck on the one tiny little French knot. That was silly to put in a French knot before doing the rest. But that's all right. Come behind it. I don't think I'm going to bring in another color of green here. I could, but I don't know. Let's see. Okay, maybe there, around that. And okay, let me just see if this finishes it. I mean, it's not the most beautiful stitching ever, but I think it does the trick as far as finishing off the colors there. I think I might possibly add a couple of little yellow French knots there, because that was in the original design to some degree. There were little specks of color, which, you know, if you know leaves, a lot of them have little flecks of colors. It's not just one surface that's totally the same. Some of them are. Okay, this might be a weird question, but do any of you have favorite leaves, like that you really love? One of my favorite leaves is called lamb's ear. I don't know if you have it wherever you are, but it is the softest leaf. Oh my goodness. Where'd my needle go? There we go. It is so, so lovely and soft. All right, we'll throw a couple of little, I think I rotate this all the way around every single time I do this. I don't know why. It's just how my brain works. Okay. And so there's a French knot. Make sure I'm not hooking it under. I almost always do triple French knots. And I mean, obviously I can do smaller French knots if I need to, but I like these big old chunky French knots. And I don't even mind if they're not perfect. I just don't. Okay, that was a double French knot. Let's see if that looks good. Pull them down. Yeah, I mean, that works. Something a little different. I don't want one there. I feel like this thing is a little floppy. I just put an extra stitch next to it because one of the little threads got loose from its friends. So let's just gather your little knot around. You know, again, K3N, very few things that can't be solved with more stitching. All right. There we go. Okay, I think that's enough little yellow flecks on that. And I believe that means that my bag is finished. And snip. Aside from if I wanted to add a little liner bag, I think we're good. So this is now finished, and these are now finished. And all of that was finished before. I love this bag. I like my little colony of woven roses down here with all the knots around it. It just reminds me of something you would see in the forest. And these little guys, I individually cut these out of something else. Actually, some of them were already just individual. It was in this little package of trims that I got. Just a random grab bag. And then the warm side, which I do love. My friend Bethany made this, and I love it. And I told her I'm going to need some more of those. My little bees. Yep, I'm very happy with this bag. It's fun. All right, friends. Would love to hear from you in the comments, especially if you have an Instagram where I can see what you're working on. So I hope you have a fabulous day, and I'll talk to you soon.